Welcome back to Decisions That Count. So, this is a show where we unravel the science of decision fatigue and explore how it impacts every aspect of our lives, from crushing it in a competitive environment in gaming or at work, to high stake business deals, or even managing your life at home. I'm Dr. Shawn Watson. I'm a neuroscientist, entrepreneur, and hopefully your guide to help understanding the amazing machine that is the human brain. So, years ago, when I was juggling the demands of research, trying to build my own business, and having a young family, I hit a wall of mental exhaustion. That's when I dove headfirst into the science of decision fatigue. And I uncovered that this is a way to rewire our brain for peak performance. And it's really a condition that no one was looking at that time.
And I'm Michelle, your co host, here to bring a dose of real life experience to the table. So, I'm a mum, a marketer, a marathon runner, and I know firsthand how decision fatigue can derail even the best laid plans.
So today's episode, it's all about tapping into the hidden superpower that can help you conquer decision fatigue and unlock performance in every aspect of your life. So we're going to learn about how to align our decisions with our core values to bring clarity, reduce that feeling of being overwhelmed, and even supercharge our mental games.
And today we are thrilled to welcome our incredible guest who's helped thousands of people do the same. He's an entrepreneur, keynote speaker, and coach who's worked with giants like Google, Unilever, HSBC, and his podcast is ranked in the top 3% globally, and his workshops consistently receive rave reviews. He is passionate, insightful, and he's got an incredible energy that is truly contagious. Please, can we welcome to the podcast
Sharad Lal. We're so excited to have you here today. I always personally love these conversations because I like to understand how the brain works, and you do as well. And it's these interchange of these two industries, professions, passions that I think is actually the coolest part, because there's no physiology without psychology and human behavior. And then the human behavior obviously relies upon the physiology. So super excited to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Shawn. Thank you very much, Michelle. I'm very excited to be here.
First of all, would love to get straight into it and ask, how do we define purpose? And how does that differ from goals and ambitions?
Maybe 10, 12 years back when I thought of the word purpose, firstly, I thought it was like an overused buzzword. I didn't know what it was. And when I thought a little bit more about it, the visual that came to mind was this person who has this calling where things could be crumbling around that person, but the person's going ahead and doing this thing that they're meant to do. And as I studied purpose more, I had some events which we can get into later, which got me clearer on what purpose is. My definition of purpose now is not this one grand thing that we are supposed to do. I feel that purpose is something which is creating a life of multiple purposeful events. So for example, if you have a cup of water here, its purpose is to store water. But we as human beings have multiple faculties. There's a creative thinking, intellectual thinking, connecting with people. We have multiple things that we need to do. And if we have a life which surrounds ourselves with these faculties getting what they need, to me, that's a life of purpose.
Wow. John?
Yeah, I immediately think about my own life, as probably when we talk to a lot of people do. No, I think it's really important, and probably the question that so many of us have is how do we find our purpose? Yeah. And I think in a world where we love to throw around this stat that decades ago, the average person was making something like 150 decisions a day. And now thoughts are at something like 35,000 decisions a day. So that the clutter in the world today, and the speed of what it's all happening. So as kind of an entrepreneur myself, I have to juggle a lot of different tasks and things I need to look for. How do you find purpose or purposes, as you say, because I completely agree with you, it's probably not one thing. And then how do you maintain it in a world with so much noise, I suppose?
2013, I suffered a huge loss. And my life till then was very one achievement after another. I was from a small town in India, and it became clear to me that to do well, I need to do well in studies. So I stood first in school, which got me into a good college, which got me into Procter & Gamble in Singapore. I joined the Boston Consulting Group, started up businesses. And to me, that became the way to live life. One achievement after another, and you get more out of it. And in 2013, I suffered an extremely huge loss. So I lost loved ones, which completely shattered my world. And it took me many, many years to heal. And during the healing process, I question this way of living. Are we supposed to go from one achievement after another? Because I remember a visual sitting alone at home in the darkness, and I looked around and there were all these possessions that I'd accumulated. And they had served me, but I asked myself that time, do these really matter? And that started me on a journey on what truly matters in life. And I read all I could, spirituality, philosophy, psychology, a little bit of neuroscience, to figure out how should we live life, what truly matters. While there were differences in what different texts said, there was something extremely common in them. The path to lasting happiness, how we should live life, lies deep within. We know inside how we should be living this life. And then I ask myself, why don't we do that? And that comes back to your point, because right from childhood, we have external stimuli telling us you should do this. And once we achieve, people clap, we do this again. Expectations from parents, competition, jealousy, like all kinds of things go on. You talk about decision fatigue, all the stimuli go on. Because of which, we do this for 30, 40 years, you lose touch with what truly matters to you. Because all this sits as, I love the word you use, noise. And to me, the path to purpose is canceling this noise. Because when we cancel this noise, when we get still, when we cancel this noise, we're able to go deep within. And when I did that, for the first time in my life, I got a peek of what truly matters, what's important. And I call that purpose. And that is what purpose is. It's removing all this noise, and seeing what's important to me right now. And then, how do I bring it out to the world? So for me, it has these two components. Internal fulfillment, beyond paychecks and stuff. Those things are good. But something that fulfills you. Maybe it's solving a problem fills you up, connecting with someone, having a great conversation, simple things. Internal fulfillment, growth. And then external impact. How do you take that and make an impact on someone else? How do you take that and make an impact on someone else that ladders up to making society a little better? And if you have multiple activities like this, to me, that's a purposeful life.
From the physiology side, we know that like when people retire and whatnot, they struggle with purpose and connections. And you even see people who lack human connection, they're higher likelihood of getting dementia. Actually, one of the biggest risk factors of dementia is social isolation or that purposeful living that you said. So I think our brain actually, from the spiritual fulfillment that you mentioned, actually the brain reflects that to a large degree, because it can start to degrade when we lose certain connections, human connections, and when we start to live alone and isolated. So it's really neat. Again, the two worlds can combine, and you see physiological evidence for kind of what you just described.
And if I'm not mistaken, you know the brain better than me. Once we do this over a period of time, we get calmer. The amygdala gets smaller. The pathways that are kind of interacting are better. Like, I don't know neuroscience, but I think there's something to do with just the brain getting calmer and the pathways getting calmer. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's we've definitely done work, and we deep dive into mindfulness, I'd call it, at large, if we just, a catch-all phrase, I would say. And certainly there's extremes to this, to stuff that's maybe not as, pseudoscience, to stuff that's been, validated in double-blind clinical trials as much as they could. And you see pretty substantive reorganizations of the brain. So no, the plastic capabilities of the brain, which we already knew about, can be greatly influenced by internal reflections and practices of mindfulness. And that's, scientifically credible. Top athletes in the world, top executives are taking, as you probably know, all of these things. But it is clinically validated. So yeah, structural changes certainly happen from internal practices of reflection. I won't speak too more to that because it's not my area, but I know it works, for sure.
I actually have a question. Sorry, I know you don't. You say it's not your area of expertise, but what do you mean about kind of reorganizing the brain or restructuring?
Sure. Yeah. And you can kind of broadly, I would break mindfulness maybe into three different components. So there's, mindfulness, there's acceptance, and then there's commitment, like goals and orientated, trying to change yourself from it. But if you look at those, even like breathing exercises consistently and body auditing, when you go through and you think about your feet and just quiet yourself, you see changes in amygdala, that's like, and even stress responses. So actually the structure and your resilience to stress, which we focused on a bit in our work, changes. So your ability to handle stress in the future physiologically is stronger. And the mindfulness practice, again, I'm going to ask you these questions because it's not my expertise, but it's just trying to build the ability to see, events and emotions from kind of a third party looking in, knowing that it's temporary, it doesn't define you, but it builds your resilience physiologically to stress. So no, it's a fascinating way, and I love it too because it's not expensive. It's not a drug that people need to take, or a fancy gym piece of equipment. They can do it at any point in their life. But I want to pull it back to you to tell us more. Not that we diverge too far, but because in your work you probably see when people take meaningful action, changes and reflection in their life, that there's also changes in their profession and personal happiness and whatnot.
Absolutely, and I think the decisions there start with. You start questioning when you go into an awakening like this. So it happened to me because I suffered a huge loss. But when I worked with people, sometimes it's like, maybe it's a loss, maybe it's you've hit your 40s and you're wondering what you're doing in life and questioning life. The questions, the big decisions are the ones that start coming up. What am I doing in life? What truly matters? And that starts you on an inward journey on why you are who you are. There's an inquiry into that. And once you're able to remove the noise, but at the same time have courage to question, because some of these things are very difficult, you unravel, it's like an onion, you unravel the truth about yourself, what's important to you over a period of time. And then these sit like purpose and values, which then guide your decision-making in the external world.
That's exactly what's happened to me over the last kind of 2-3 years. So since settling into being a mom and becoming sober. So I'm over 2.5 years sober now. That's exactly what's happened. That you start to question who I am and who do I want to be. And I've changed a lot like over the last couple of years in the best possible ways. But yeah, everything that you're saying, I'm like,
that's such a good process. And from a decision fatigue standpoint, sometimes when you're just going into the core of what's important, like you said, there are 300,000 or whatever the number of stimuli that's there, those start vanishing. And what your focus area comes down to is very focused. And I think two things happen. One is you're focusing on what really matters and is important. And the second thing that I've seen that starts happening, and that's also related to mindfulness, which they call insight mindfulness, you start seeing patterns. You start seeing the causality of why you're doing things, like how your behavior is, who you are. And with those patterns, there's some amount of wisdom that comes. And that leads to insight, which leads you towards decisions. So there are two things. There's this zeroing out the noise, removing it. And second, seeing patterns. And as we get older, we are able to see patterns much better than when we were younger. And with that wisdom and that clarity, we then have a starting point of how do we want to recreate our life in some ways, or change our life, or focus on what really matters.
So Sharad, question for you on that then. So in the people you work with too, and I just, maybe in my own life, there's no dramatic change in my life, but I'd say it's more of that slow boil, that, you know, the frog in the pot, that you don't notice the temperature changing until you may be too far off track. But also I've noticed, like kids, there's catalysts in my life that would change the purpose, right? And so I guess it's trying to reorientate your life for something that was, working before. So like I'm very passionate about Alzheimer's work, and not that that's changed, it's just when kids came into my life, focus switches. So with that, like, I guess this process is ongoing, right? It's not like you set a purpose and then that's who or what you are, or at least my own life, that's what it feels like, I suppose.
Absolutely right. So like you mentioned, catalysts, sometimes they're subtle, sometimes they're big catalysts. We're changing, our life circumstances are changing, and kids is a huge area in all the work that I've done. So even though I would work in boardrooms with senior executives and we would go back to important events and what truly matters, for a lot of people, it would go down to the birth of their kid, or the time the kid left their house and starts going to the world. Because these are critical moments. And when we talk about impact, we can talk about impact in terms of 100,000 people, or we can talk about deeper impact into one person. That's our kid who we bring in. And that deeper impact sometimes with kids has such a bigger meaning to many people, like becoming mums and for me as a father as well, that purpose for a period of time gets into that.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly me. I think I went from kind of wanting to change the world as the top priority to just wanting to change one world.
Yes, yes.
But it is a big change.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions on
Yes.
decision fatigue.
Okay.
This is where I'm
All
super
right.
fascinated about. Okay, so decision fatigue, as we're under, again, this is all very new science.
Yeah.
This is something that our parents never had to worry about, right? Because they didn't have this in less extreme circumstances. But generally speaking, previous generations didn't have this much thrown at us, right? And if the theory holds that, so decision fatigue is when the quality of our decisions begin to decline in sessions of long decision making, or if you're in situations of stress, it can happen rapidly. So within 45 minutes in a super stressful environment, you can suffer from the condition, or over just a long office day, 3 p.m., you may be suffering from it. And decision fatigue, as I said, it affects the quality of our decisions through kind of two mechanisms we can say. So decision avoidance, so you just don't want to take a decision, or procrastination, it can even mean, or the email in your inbox that you just don't want to open because it forces you to make a decision. To the other one, which is a bit more maybe sinister, it's called default decision making. So your brain will actually kind of take the conscious decision away, and it'll start making an unconscious decision for you based on past experience, what it's comfortable with, what it feels is the safe decision at the time. So this could be, me coming home from work and I'm playing with the kids, and instead of going and do something new with them, I'm so tired, I have decision fatigue by the end of the day, that I just default to playing the same game with them because it's just the easiest decision to make. From that to the serious circumstances of judges who, in the afternoon, they won't grant people parole because they have decision fatigue, and the unconscious safe decision is to keep them into prison. So the implications are from the home to the courtroom to the executive environment. Just to say that the quality of our decisions physiologically changes over the course of the day. How can we set upon this journey of finding our purpose when it's not just the noise, but that noise has a physiological consequence of reducing our abilities to maybe make a good decision for us? Maybe I'll leave it with one more example before I want to pass to you. So it could even be like health. So we get home from a long day, we have decision fatigue. Instead of picking a restaurant or, good healthy food, we made his default to a McDonald's order because it's the simplest, easiest thing to do. And we always talk about this with kids, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I'm not going to try to argue with them to eat vegetables. I'm just going to order something that I know that they're going to eat. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that? And how do you think this could affect someone's kind of personal journey on purpose when there's these physiological restrictions?
So I've completely, like anyone listening would completely agree with you on how the decision fatigue works, that after a point of time, you don't want to take the decision and do simple stuff. In my view, and let's just try and brainstorm and see how this could work. I think in a way purpose could help, because what sometimes purpose does is simplification, where you're eliminating a lot of the things. And once you do, and that's something that I do in my workshops towards the end. I'm normally not like, normally when you do a purpose workshop, people think this guy's going to tell me to meditate, then he's going to tell me to do something. I tell people you should not add a new activity. Can we take out 5 things? And only when you take out 5 things, add 1 thing. Because if you look at lives in Singapore, exactly like you said, it's one thing after another. Because of which the number of decisions that you need to make, the times you need to use your brain is hugely, like the cognitive load is huge. If you're able to simplify things and remove things, because I see myself also, I see the hypocrite in myself. Like I go and preach purpose, and then I go to my kids and I'm losing my cool and just kind of, because I can't take decisions. So how do I simplify and get space in my life and remove certain things? Now, some people may not have the luxury of doing it because you're really working hard, but then you also, like a high performer, want to work hard, plus do this, plus meet friends, plus go to the gym, plus do something else. Sometimes it's stuff like just removing even things like meditation. So for me, like meditation sounds like a very good thing to get space. But when I had my little daughters, who still, when they were younger, that morning time was to be with them. So I was juggling between meditating, gym, and spending time. And I did all things badly. So there are choices that we have in certain things that we can just remove. So if we can remove quite a few things, I think that could be one way of getting some amount of better decision making, I feel.
No, I love it. And I think, I mean, Michelle's going to talk about this for sure, because she's started to move to like a decision list even to try to simplify life. Like,
Yeah. So, I will be honest, like I am a person that, I'm busy. I'm a busy person.
She's one of those insane high performers that you described.
That's, and I love a to-do list. I love adding things on and setting big goals. And actually, my mantra for this year is do less and achieve more. Because what you were saying about kind of creating space is like, if I don't make room for space where I can think about nothing and think about everything at the same time, is ideas won't come, opportunities won't come. I won't be able to see anything. I won't know if I'm making a right decision because I haven't got time to think about my decisions because I'm kind of running at 100 miles an hour. But one thing that I have changed this year in that is, rather than have my to-do list, I have a decision list. Rather than looking at my day as things that I have to do, I'm looking at my day as like decisions that I have to make. Okay, what decisions have to get made today? What require the most amount of thinking time? So if I'm writing an influencer marketing strategy, for example, there's going to be many decisions that need to be made within that based on research and data that needs to be done. That is going to be a decision heavy activity. So that should be done first thing in the morning when I am not suffering from decision fatigue. What decisions are less important? So I love online shopping. And I spend and online shopping, I've actually realized, is one of the worst things for causing decision fatigue. And I don't know if anybody knows this, that when you scroll like a clothes shop online and you're adding things to the basket, like you can look at 1,000 different dresses. And I'm not joking. Like in 10 minutes, you could look at 1,000 different tops or 1,000 different dresses as you're scrolling online shopping. And you're kind of you're looking at every single item thinking, do I like that? Don't I like that? Shall I add it to my favorite? Shall I add it to my bag? And I'm the type of person that will go through literally 1,000 dresses in about 10 minutes. I will put them in my bag. And then I'll kind of whittle it down. And then once I might have 15 items in my bag, and then I will go into the bag and make the decision on whether I want to keep all of those. But there are so many times where I abandon the cart because I'm like, I cannot make a decision on this. I'm done. I've exhausted myself. But sorry, just coming back to the most important decisions of my day is like, if I do need to go and do online shopping, I would do it at the end of the day because I don't want to waste all my amazing decisions early in the morning. Or maybe I will partly do it, and this is what I'm doing at the moment because we're traveling with the kids to a cold country in a couple of weeks and I need them to get some winter clothes. But what I did in the evening was I filled the basket in the evening, like made the short, so looked at all the clothes, quickly filled the basket, and then in the morning I went through the basket to the short list and then made the decision on what to buy. Rather than buying all 15 items, choose the 5 that I'm going to do in the morning. So I'm trying to be more conscious about my decision making and thinking about what needs to get done as a decision or the decisions that encompass that activity.
It totally resonates with me. I think my viewpoint, a similar story, but maybe trying to like a bit back to purpose is what I realized too is I was spending maybe all my best decisions on things that maybe wasn't matching my purpose, right? So if my best decisions are in the morning, that's when I should be making decisions about my children, right? Or my wife, where we're going to do our vacation, in the weekend, all those decisions are the ones that matter the most to me. Because I realized in my life is when I got home from work and that's when I was interacting and I was trying to deal with the kids and whatnot, but those were the worst quality decisions, right? So I found the priority, and that's why I love Michelle's decision list, is you can start to, I started to kind of prioritize maybe a little bit on purpose as well, as like, if I have a finite number of decisions in the day, of high quality decisions, where am I going to spend them, right? So look at decisions as kind of a commodity. And yeah, just like your dresses, like where are you going to spend your good decisions at, right? Like it really changed my view of how I interacted. But I don't know if you thought about that from like a purpose perspective.
I love that. So I've thought of, these are sparking thoughts as the two of you are speaking. I've always thought of organizing my day in such a way that I do like deep work in the morning, because that's when my brain works well. But I love the thought of, instead of activity, even thinking about decisions, because often your decision may not take a really long time, but it's an important decision. And instead of doing it at night, park some important decisions in the morning when you're fully alert. So I love that thought, and it's sparking new thoughts in me. I think there's something else, just bringing to the mix, you might know better, about energy management, like our energy states and decision making. So of course, for a lot of people in the morning, that's very strong. But for some people, they get more energized after having a great conversation, and suddenly you feel everything's working well, or you might get drained after that. So I don't know if it's looking at energy and decision making, that figuring out when is your best energy levels, and that's when you're taking the right decisions and, managing that. I don't know if you looked at that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, energy is tough because it can mean kind of two different things. So more physiology, like sense of feeling tired, but it also energy could be the motivation, the spark, the excitement, I meant motivation, right? Yeah, which is maybe more difficult to quantify, I would say, for like when to do it. What we know about decision fatigue is it happens quicker with emotionally engaged decisions. So if it's something you're really passionate about, you certainly want to do it in the morning, because that's going to drain you quicker because you're more engaged to it. So like mums, like every decision you make about your children is going to drain you super quick, because every decision is very emotionally connected to decisions. Yeah, and I think maybe analogy to how I think of it now too is like, you're running if you have to run a marathon, and when you're going to do it, in the morning or in the afternoon, right? You just kind of have to think of your decisions in a similar time point. But then it's kind of working with someone like you to, again, find out what marathon should you be running.
Yes.
So. I hear what you're saying, though. Is like I'm an energy generator. So I'm a generator from my human design, and I will generate energy from things that I love doing, things that excite me, things that I'm feeling really passionate about. And yesterday we just kind of had one of those days where it was like call back-to-back calls, and every call was just amazing, and it was just great energy. I was feeding off it. But then I completely crashed afterwards. But that being said, I think the energy and the decision fatigue is still different in my opinion. Obviously, like, I'm not a neuroscientist. I think I'd already by 4 o'clock I'd already made, even though I was excited by the calls and they were amazing and they were brilliant, I was almost certainly suffering from decision fatigue. And I think if somebody on those calls, rather than those calls being fact finding, which is another thing I'm trying to do, I'm trying to have more of my fact-finding calls and things that I know will give the energy in the afternoons, where I'm not necessarily having to make a decision on those. But I think if somebody on any of those calls had said, right, we need you to make a decision now, I think I would have not had the confidence in my decision making. I could have made a decision, but I don't feel like I had the capacity to take in all of the variables and really have confidence in what I was deciding.
I think related to that, the two things that just came to mind on decision making, which are related to purpose, because purpose is a lot about the inner world. I think there is this awareness where you have self-awareness that right now I'm tired, I'm not doing well. And it's a good time just to tap out and not take difficult decisions. So maybe that's one framework to look at, because awareness is the key to purpose, it's the key to mindfulness, it's the key to the inner world. The second is emotional regulation, which is a very strong mindfulness technique where you're clear about the emotion that you're having. The mindfulness people are constantly checking in as to the emotional state. And you even have apps to kind of do that in high states of emotion, low states of emotions. And then you can always figure out over a period of time that these heightened states, whether they are positive or negative, are not the states to take decisions in. Maybe my decision should be taken in these middle states. So I think, I don't know, or if I'm in these heightened states and I have to take a decision, maybe I do 10 deep breaths to regulate myself and come back to normal, and then go out and take this decision. I've seen myself do that a few times where I don't think I can take the right decision right now. Out, deep breaths, back, or take a walk, then take the decision. So I don't know if that works as well.
Yeah, I think it absolutely would. The toughest part is that awareness. I think it's because usually, and we probably all relate, we get so caught up in decisions that it's difficult to have it. And I think a lot of professions too doesn't even give you the space, as you described it, to take the breath. Because a lot of the decision fatigue work, the more recent stuff, was in healthcare professionals. And what's interesting in that work is a lot of the people are obviously very passionate about what they do. It's a very human career choice. And in nurses, actually, when they suffer from decision fatigue, they start to suffer from depression, lower quality of life. They start to become really unhappy about what they're doing, probably because they don't have that space to breathe or to think about, their emotional states or awareness. But just the physiological condition of decision fatigue kind of derails, it seems, maybe their purpose or their goals, or it's kind of, it overcomes the joys of their work very rapidly, because you just feel that just so drained from it. So
I love that.
That space is I think what's the key. And like you said, in the awareness, it's just learning how to do that appropriately in your situation.
There's some research around purpose and burnout, and quite often they're related for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. Like a healthcare worker, or people who are so passionate about their purpose that I'm making such a big difference, that you don't take care of yourself and you exhaust yourself. And that is why over a period of time, it's difficult to tap out from that, because it's part of your purpose. But if you really check in, it's not giving you the purpose. It's more like a compulsive drive that now you're just going on doing it because it's the right thing to do. It's taking the joy out of it. I feel that has implications both on purpose, fulfillment, happiness, and decision making, because both things start going bad. And many of us may have seen ourselves in projects which are way past our prime because we burnt ourselves out, and we just continue doing it, making bad decisions and not finding the joy.
So I would love to ask two questions. So one's going to follow on from the other. So the first is, how do we find our purpose? And then the second is, once we know our purpose, how can that influence your decision making?
Right.
And help you make the best decisions for you?
So my framework is always to remove the noise. And I think there are a few ways to do it. You could have someone like a coach helping you, who takes you through an inner guided journey, which removes all the noise so that you can go deeper and see it. So there's a meditative way of doing it. If you don't have the luxury of that, I think some open-ended questions could help. And a few open-ended questions to reflect on are, what energizes me? So just thinking back, purpose, many of us think is outside and inspiration, but we're going to go back into ourselves and see, hey, what's energized me? Do I remember a time when I felt my full power? I felt like I was doing excellent. I didn't care what the world thought about me. Going back to that time and seeing what was happening. Those are some questions that we could answer. Journaling, because all we're trying to do is we're going to go deeper and spit out what's at the bottom. Once we journal over a period of time, initially we could just look at surface level stuff, but over a period of time, we go deeper. So there are reflective, the only path to me for purpose, the way I define it, is inwards. And the way to do it is any of these techniques will start giving you ideas on what is important to you, because we're trying to address beyond all the noise, the societal expectation, what truly is important to me. And some of these things will give you answers to it. Sometimes it's also looking at, once you have awareness, what kind of activities are you drawn towards? What is it telling you about yourself? All these things give you an idea of purpose. So let's say we do this, and this could be over a few months. We do these exercises and we start getting some hints that, oh, I like speaking, I like motivating people, whatever that is. Second point is, how do you bring that to life? When we talk of purpose, let's talk about, let's say, personal, being with our kids, spending time. That's one of it. But I think you're referring to maybe a vocation of what you do and work. There's a purpose, and then there's a commercialization. And I think that is a fairly long process, because there's an idealistic viewpoint on what you think is important. And then when you want to bring it out to the world, there's a commercialization, which has constraints in terms of, you still maybe want to make some money out of it. You might want to have some flexibility in terms of time. So this is my life. These are my needs. These are my responsibilities. This is a purpose that is coming important to me in this vague form. How do I match it together? And maybe I can give you an example of how I kind of did it over a period of time that could be useful. So when I had this calling, my thought was, I want to really help people with their careers, because that's my gift. So I was an entrepreneur. I had my agency business. I didn't want to let that go. So on the side, I started a nonprofit helping people in their careers. That worked well. I got a lot of mentors. We were able to get people in Bloomberg, Uber, some companies, and that seemed good. But during that process, I realized that beyond work, people are looking at how do I shift my life? And that took me towards the path of life coaching. So I became a life coach. Later, I set up a company, which was a coaching platform where I was getting life coaches and people together. I enjoyed it because that's what I thought I wanted to do. But this is how purpose works. As I pictured myself all my life, just sitting in a room and working with someone, there was a large part of me that got shut off. Like, I like meeting many people. And so as I was commercializing my purpose, which is making an impact on people, I realized there's another part of me which is not really working well here. So I paused that for a while and figured out, hey, what do I want to do? I got a CEO in the meanwhile to run my company because I had an agency business. And then I just started a podcast. And with the podcast, somebody listened to it and said, hey, why don't you come to my company? He was my partner at BCG and he joined a new company. And I want folks to learn about purpose, and what you said about Buddhism and Stoicism makes a lot of sense. Can you put in the corporate world? So we did a few sessions which worked really well. And then over a period of time, I realized that is a good space because people get paid reasonably well to be keynote speakers, to do workshops. It's something I enjoy because there are many people. I make an impact. And that seemed to be something that was working. So then I sold my agency and I started focusing on this because it looked like it could be something that could work. This took 10 years in the background of trying, commercializing. And my key lesson is when we start with purpose, finally where many of us end up. First, it's a process. And maybe after 2 years, if we're talking, it could be something else. So it's a constantly evolving process. It's not a destination. Second, it leads us to, if you look at a matrix of known and unknown, it leads us to what is called an unknown unknown. You don't even know the unknown where you're going to go to. When I started out, I never thought I'd be doing leadership development programs with companies.
Yeah.
But my path took me towards that. So that is how I would think of purpose. One, there is a calling, and you talked about how to commercialize it. Second, there's an exploration. You explore things and come back. Explore things, learn more about yourself, and keep iterating and iterating and iterating. And that itself is the destination. We're not going anywhere. That's itself, we're getting alive because things are also going to happen in life. I had kids in the middle, I had something else. So a lot of things are going to happen, but it's that process that we continue to do.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love the decision making. It's like making a decision, coming back.
Yes.
So like always, it's not like you find your purpose and then you make all of your decisions based on that purpose, and that purpose is fixed. You know, it's like you're saying, okay, well, you know, this is what I feel and this is what I want to do. Okay, I'm going to make some decisions, but I'm going to come back to this and see how this feels.
Yes.
So it's informing your decision making, not necessarily in a rigid way.
Absolutely. And if I could add to that, very often the people that I work with are people who are almost burnt out in their corporate career. So if you ask them to make a decision then, so if you ask someone who hasn't eaten food for 2 days to make a decision, they might choose KFC, which may not be the right idea. So those people say, I want to retire and go to a farm in New Zealand, right? Which may or may not be the right option. Most of the time it's not. Most of the time people come back to that. But it's like moving from one lopsided life to another because you want to go there. But I guess the process then comes, instead of the extremes, over a period of time, don't take a decision there you cannot unturn. So that's why I like the Amazon Jeff Bezos 2-door decisions. Take a decision where you can go in, learn something and come back so that you learn something about yourself. And between the extremes, you figure out what your normal is over a period of time by experiencing stuff, by clarifying your values and what you think were important, where the rubber hits the ground, and then creating the life in that way.
Everything kind of you said there, what really struck me is it all comes internally. And there's a world outside from marketeers
I'm a marketer as well.
Oh, both of you.
Guilty.
But who are sending us a message of what should make us happy.
Yes.
And their whole job is trying to convince us that a farm in New Zealand, or whatever it may be, a bag, 1,000 dresses, whatever,
Yes. Yeah.
is purpose. And I think it's really, because everything you just defined there, it all starts inside, right?
Yes.
So it's trying to cut out that noise, the messaging, the marketing.
Yes.
And because I guess marketing is trying to convince people to adopt your version of happiness, right? Essentially, that's what you're trying to do as a marketer, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's trying to obviously you can't avoid it, but it's trying to find it internally, which is a struggle to be honest.
100%.
Like
100%.
that's probably the hardest part when you scroll me, and social's worse. Like probably the worst thing in the world when you see what everybody else has and stuff,
and
especially for kids.
I just wanted to touch on that because that one of the biggest learnings that I've had since working with you and really kind of getting into this world of neuroscience and decision fatigue is that if you have got a finite number of decisions a day and your best decisions are going to be in the morning, and as your day goes on, the quality of your decisions is going to decline, then the worst thing that you can do when you wake up in the morning is get on social media and scroll, because
such a good point.
You're within, you can be on Instagram for 15 minutes and have used hundreds, if not thousands of decisions.
Such a good
just point. Scrolling through, because every piece of content, your brain is consciously or subconsciously having to make a decision whether to react, engage, watch, move on, scroll past. And you've just wasted all of your best decisions of the day, often on content that's not going to make you feel very good about yourself.
Yeah. No, it's a great point.
You talk about kind of cutting out the noise to be able to really hear your purpose and hear your inner voice. It's like, well, you know, cut off the noise, and particularly cut off the noise, you know, when we're at the most important times of the day. Mm-hmm. But it's impossible to avoid it all, right? Like you can't.
But maybe late at night when you're, or not late at night is also bad. Maybe in the evening, 6 p.m. or something is the time for social media, because then your decisions are already done.
Yeah. Oh, my catalyst for the social in the morning thing, though, was actually, you know, really learning about decision fatigue over the number of years. Because honestly, I wouldn't have changed behavior unless I realized that, I was giving Reddit my decisions or Facebook my decisions, and it was taking away from my kids or whatever, right? Because the thing about decision fatigue is, at the end of the day, when you can't decide and you let someone else pick the restaurant for you, like you're giving them your decisions. You're giving up kind of your autonomy in some sense, because you're letting other people's circumstances make decisions for you because you're too fatigued to make the decision yourself. Even myself, once I got more into this, that was to use the word catalyst again, to realize, who am I giving my decisions to, right? Am I giving it to the people or the purposes, I suppose, that mean the most to me?
Sometimes some decisions feel really impossible to make. What's your advice on helping people kind of navigate those big life decisions?
So I think big life decisions are very complicated. So the first advice I would give is take your time on it, not an abrupt one, because you need to learn. There's some thoughts that you have, and often there are dependencies around, and you need to try some things to figure out what really works. So for example, in Singapore, you have this, let's take an example and maybe we talk through it. In Singapore, you have this thing of, hey, should we go back to the UK and live there? Maybe it's better for the kids, or do we live here? That's a thing I've seen most couples, and even Sarah and I kind of went through it. That's a big decision, because you can't suddenly one night say, hey, I've had enough, now I'm packing up and going, because kids are dependent, there's kids admission, there's kids school, there's 100 other things there. So I think the way I would approach it is, first, let's look at, I like then looking at different models. Let's say there are 3 or 4 outputs that can happen. So maybe there's living there, living in the UK, living in Singapore, or different options, and what are the connotations of that. So first, just a basic list. I like immersing myself into one kind of a thing. So let's say we're moving to UK. Let's start with the 2-door activities. Let's start looking for school admission for our kids. And we go through that process, which will take a while. Let's start looking at houses in the UK. We're not taking any decisions, but we're starting with some of these. Once we do this over a month, we already get a sense of, actually, living in the UK seems a little complicated. It's going to be cold. I'm thinking of admissions. We have to make sure the kids, and I'm dropping the kids, but I'm also picking them up. I don't have my helper. You're starting to understand the reality of that decision. And you say, oh, maybe this doesn't work. And then you go into the other land and you start doing some, again, two-door activities. You're not moving, but all right, maybe we're moving to another house out here in Singapore to see, maybe we want space. That's the thing that came out. Or maybe we want something else. Try some of these. Let's look at houses that are bigger. Then imagine ourselves in those houses and say, that works, that doesn't work, and then come to a decision. So I think the framework for me would be, you plot out what potential options could be. Let's put real options out there. There are 3 or 4 options that could come out of these big life decisions. And within each, if something aligns towards you, and there's of course a partner making that decision, let's say a big one, you go into it with two-way doors and learn more about yourself and the reality of that situation. And when we do that with the 3 or 4 options, we get a sense of what underlying issue has been causing us this problem. And once we get a clarity of, maybe the underlying issue is, I want my kids to be near their grandparents, so it might be love or something, but then it could be solved by more holidays. We don't do any exotic holidays. We just go back to our grandparents, something like that. We give up on something else. Then the negotiating table opens up with options on what you give up and what you don't. And finally negotiate your way to what that life could look like.
I also think that often big decisions are actually hundreds of micro decisions.
Yes.
You know, I think when a company is making a decision to reorganize the company, okay, of course there's one massive decision at the top that's yes or no, we are going to reorganize the company, but then that's hundreds if not thousands of micro decisions that make up that one big decision, right? And I think it's just making sure that you're clear-headed enough with what feels like smaller decisions because they're going to impact a bigger one.
Yes.
So, you know, if you're looking at houses and you're maybe making a decision on schools, it's actually it's not the decision, but it's an important part of the decision.
Yes.
So therefore giving the micro decisions the time and the energy and making sure you're not fatigued when you're making those micro decisions.
And I think through the process, to add to that, there are 1 or 2 underlying issues that demand this transition. And it's very difficult to know that in the noise. And even if you meditate and stuff, it's still very difficult to know. The only way to know, I think, is like you said, micro decisions, that once you look at each part of it, you give yourself time, the actual underlying issue, once 2 values are competing with each other, the actual underlying issue comes up over a 3-4 month period of time.
Yeah, I like that from your example, because going through that journey, it sounds like of moving, you're actually kind of undercovering why you want to in the first place, right? Which you may not be as apparent when you start that journey. So maybe quickly, just for people who don't know the 2-door thing, could you just double down quick on that for the Bezos?
So Jeff Bezos, I love this framework. I use it across. He uses it for business, where people come with, he tells people that when you're taking decisions, don't take 1-door decision, take 2-door decisions. 1-door decision means a decision that you walk into the door, you can't walk back out. So in this case would be, I'm giving up my PR, I'm giving up everything, I'm moving to the UK, I have nothing to do with Singapore.
Non-reversible.
Non-reversible. Yeah. You could technically reverse it, but it's like extremely difficult to reverse.
Right.
I always think of like, it's amputating your leg.
It's amputating your leg.
Once you amputate your leg, there's no growing it back.
There's no growing it back. So you're amputating your leg. So that is a 1-way decision. A 2-way decision would be, we still can't decide. Maybe we spend 6 months in the UK. So the kids still have admission. We may spend a little extra money. They're in 2 schools, or we have 2 houses, whatever. There's a certain amount we put in place, but we're going to test it out and we can come back here. I mean, if it comes to that, then maybe it's just a summer or whatever. So that's a 2-way decision where you've done something, you've gone into a door, you've experienced it, you've learned something about yourself, you've come back in. So you're more informed than you were before, but you haven't burnt the bridges. Now, having said that, there are certain people like Derek Sivers, others who believe in 1-door decisions where they call burning the ships. So what he did was, and burning the ships has something to do with when the explorers from Europe were going to America, they burned the ship so they couldn't go back
Mm-hmm.
because they wanted to make it work. So sometimes when you're setting up a company and you've thought about it a lot, some people, I think in some situations say, we're going to burn the ship that we can't go back, so we're going to make this work. So for what he did was, the American citizen, he gave up his American citizenship, did everything and moved to New Zealand. And he said, because I want to make it work. Mm-hmm. And it worked for him, whatever. He was single, alone, and he talks a little bit about burning the ship. But that's also one way to think about it. And I think it depends on the situation. Like sometimes if you're not making that decision, it's okay to try something which only affects you by burning the ship. So you make sure you do it. Like leap of faith entrepreneurship, I think, is one of them where you have to at some stage take that leap. But in others, which are very complicated, your spouse, your kids, your others, I think it's good to take those two-door decisions.
Sharad, thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
No,
I love the work. I
Super
love the work you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very excited about all the various products you're going to bring out into the world. So congratulations, guys.
It's going to be amazing.
We got a journey.
Yeah, we have. We have lots of decisions
Lots of decisions
to get made. But I think a deep sense of purpose is there. And that's when you have that, it's magic.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, it really fuels you in a different way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my takeaway is the noise.
Yes.
So I love how actually when you go into places, it's not adding things, it's taking away.
Yeah.
And then just remembering that purpose is internal,
Yes.
right? Despite the everything that's bombarded our way.
Yeah.
No, super insightful. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We will link to all of Sharad's podcasts and LinkedIn and just everything, all of your incredible resources. And then to anyone that's still listening, watching, thank you so much. It has been such an insightful conversation. And we'd love to have you on again at some point because I feel like we could have talked in a lot more detail. But yeah, so please tell us what you guys think as well. If you like, share, comment. We'd just love to hear from you. If you've got any questions, particularly for Shawn and Sharad, please drop them below and we'll make sure we answer them.
Awesome. Thanks. Yes, so much again, Sharad. It was really insightful. I love these conversations again when physiologists talk to how it actually impacts humans, right? It's probably the most fascinating conversations that I have. So thank you so much for coming on. And yes, do link to all your content. I've certainly started to listen through all your podcasts. The only problem with them is every one I need to reflect on it for so long after. You can't binge them because they're extremely insightful. So yeah, highly encourage all of our listeners, check it out. There's definitely some great content there. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And to everyone, just make sure you make every decision count.